In this Music Theory Explained Simply video series, I'm going to try and explain the most important topics of music theory in the simplest way I can. The goal of these videos is to help you build a solid understanding of music theory so you can start applying it to guitar. In this video, I'm going to explain note names in the simplest way possible. The way we name notes can cause some confusion, so before you go on to learn about scales, chords, modes, and other music theory topics, let's have a quick look at how we name notes. In Western music, there are 12 notes. It would be easy if we could number the notes 1 through to 12, or use letters from A through to L to match the number of notes. But that's not what we do. Instead, we use 7 letters to name the notes: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We call any notes that use these 7 letters natural notes. So when you play the note A on guitar, you're playing A natural. When you're playing F, you're playing F natural. We'll take another look at this later on. As you can guess, 7 letters isn't enough to cover 12 notes. Those 7 letters create gaps that we need to fill. We stretch those 7 letters over the 12 notes and fill in the gaps with something called accidentals. You've probably heard of notes like F sharp, B flat, and C sharp. Those sharp and flat notes are how we fill in the gaps. Let's start with sharps. We get a sharp note when we raise a note by 1 fret on guitar. So if we start on an A note and move 1 fret up, the note we end up on is called A sharp. We write sharp notes with a symbol that looks like a hash or pound sign. So in between the notes A and B, we have the note A sharp. We call it A sharp and not B sharp because we get the sharp note by moving up from a lower note. Or you can think of it as we take the note letter from the previous note. What causes some confusion with note names is that we don't have sharp notes in between every 2 notes. If we did this, we would get 14 notes instead of the 12 we need. So there are 2 places where we don't have any sharp notes. There is no note between B and C. There's no B sharp note in between the 2. The other position where there's no in-between note is E and F. There's no E sharp between those 2 notes. Let's walk through all the notes so this makes more sense. In between A and B, we have A sharp. There's nothing in between B and C. Between C and D, we have C sharp. Between D and E, we get D sharp. There's nothing in between E and F. And between F and G, we get F sharp. If you count all of them up, that's 11 notes. Have a guess what you think the last note is based on how we get all the other note names. Remember that we get the sharp notes letter from the previous note. So seeing as the last note was G, the next note up is G sharp. Now we've covered all 12 notes. But what happens if we play a G sharp, then move up 1 more fret? This is where the names come back around and we start again on A. So as we move up and down the notes on a guitar, the note names loop around. If we play the note and move down 1 fret, we will end up on a G sharp. This will make more sense after you watch my video on intervals. Now there's one more way of writing these in-between notes. Instead of using sharp symbols, we can name them with a different symbol called flats. Flat symbols are written with something that looks like a little B. With sharp notes, we move up 1 fret. So 1 fret up from A is A sharp. With flat notes, we move down 1 fret. So if we start on the note A, 1 fret down from A is A flat. Let's go through all the notes so you can see how to find flat notes. Between A and B, we get B flat. There's nothing between B and C. Between C and D, we get D flat. Between D and E, we get E flat. There's nothing between E and F. Between F and G, we get G flat. Then finally, between G and A, we get A flat. This gives us 12 notes and they keep looping around after A flat. This can be confusing at first because each of these in-between notes have 2 names. The note between A and B can be called A sharp or B flat. The note between C and D can be called C sharp or D flat. The important point to remember is that they're the same note. A sharp and B flat sound exactly the same. Here's what A sharp sounds like. Now here's what B flat sounds like. Both notes have the exact same pitch. There are reasons why we have 2 different names for these notes that I explain in my video on intervals. As you learn more about music theory, you'll learn when to use sharp and when to use flat. But for now, all you need to know is that these in-between notes have two names. A good way to think about this is by looking at the piano. Don't worry, these videos will focus on guitar, but the piano gives us an easy way to visualize these in-between notes. The white keys on the piano match up to the 7 natural notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Move across one white key from the right of G and you'll get A. The black keys are our in-between notes. Between the white keys C and D, there's one black key. We can call this key C sharp or D flat, but the important point is that it's still the exact same key and gives us the exact same pitch. Whether you call it C sharp or D flat, it's still the same note. You can also see that there's no black key between the notes B and C or between E and F. It's a bit harder to visualize the notes on the guitar, so it's handy to see the note names mapped out on a piano. Now let's look at how all this works on the fretboard, so you can learn to find any note name on your guitar. The 6 strings on the guitar are named from lowest to highest sounding E, A, D, G, B, and E. Let's look at the notes on the low E string. The open string is E. What do we get when we move up one fret from E? What's the note name on the first fret on the E string? Remember that there's no note in between E and F, so this note is F. Moving up one fret from F, what do we get? We get F sharp. What's the other way of naming F sharp? It'll be something flat. To figure out what that something is, you look at what the note is one fret higher. The next note up from F sharp is G, so the other way of writing F sharp is G flat. The more you practice this, the easier it will feel, so don't stress if you don't feel confident yet. One fret up from G is G sharp or A flat. One fret up from there is A. This note, A, also happens to be the exact same note as the next open string. Try playing the 5th fret on the E string, then play the open A string. You'll hear that they're the exact same note if your guitar is in tune. One fret up from A is A sharp or B flat. One fret up from there is B. Remember that there's nothing between B and C, so the next note up is C. Next is C sharp or D flat, then D. Next we get D sharp or E flat. Then on the 12th fret, we get E. Notice that the 12th fret on guitars usually have 2 dot markers or use a special fret inlay. That's because that's the point where the notes start repeating from the open string. The open string is E, as is the 12th fret. That means if you know the note names up to the 12th fret, you automatically know all the notes above the 12th fret. For example, the 13th fret on the E string is F, just like it is on the 1st fret. The 14th fret is F sharp or G flat, just like the 2nd fret, and so on. I recommend practicing moving up and down each string to get used to naming the notes. The more you do this, the easier it will be when you try and find the note names of anything you're playing. There's a lesson on my website on how to memorize the note names on the fretboard, so check that lesson out. The next video I recommend watching to continue learning music theory is my video on intervals. It explains the building blocks you'll use to understand chords and scales. Before you go on to the next video, here are the main points to remember with note names. There are 12 notes. We name these 12 notes with 7 letters, A through to G. This creates gaps, and we fill those gaps in by using 2 different symbols, sharps and flats. We get a sharp note by moving up 1 fret from the natural note. We get a flat note by moving down 1 fret from a natural note. There's no note in between B and C or between E and F. All other notes have sharp or flat notes in between them. Now that you have an understanding on how we name the notes, you're ready to move on to my video on intervals, and you'll start to put those note names to use. If you want to learn music theory in a course format, I've created a free online course on my website you can enroll in. Check out the link in the description to get access to the course. If you found this video useful, please let me know by liking and commenting below. You can get more videos like this by subscribing now.